"You're in danger. Pretend I'm your husband," the Alpha King whispered. What happened next shocked all. High in the mountains, the royal citadel loomed over forests blackened by ancient magic, its towers reaching into the mist like frozen fingers. It was a kingdom of secrets and shadows, where whispers carried more weight than swords and alliances could crumble with a single glance. Lady Seraphine moved cautiously through the narrow streets of Eldenport, her cloak pulled tight over her shoulders. Her heart beat in nervous rhythm, every step echoing through the empty alleyways. She had learned long ago that the world was not kind to those born under a curse. Her family had been marked since her birth, though no one dared speak the word aloud, and now, framed for a treason they did not commit, she was hunted. The night was alive with danger. Servants hurried past, whispering of spies and assassins, while the scent of smoke and wet stone filled the air. Seraphine's mind raced as she ducked behind a pillar, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of pursuit. Every shadow seemed alive, every movement a potential threat. Her fingers brushed the small pendant she always wore, the last gift from her mother, hoping its magic would protect her tonight. A sound behind her made her freeze. A shadow moved across the wall, swift and deliberate. She turned, expecting an assassin, but instead, a figure emerged from the darkness. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried an aura of authority that made her chest tighten. His dark hair fell in waves over his forehead, and his eyes, gray as storm clouds, seemed to peer straight through her. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, his voice a low whisper that somehow filled the alley. Seraphine's breath caught. There was power in him, an unyielding command she could not ignore. Who are you?" she asked, though her fear betrayed her. "I am Kale," he said simply, "Alpha King of the Shadowed Mountains, and tonight you are in danger." Before she could respond, movement in the alley made her flinch. An assassin stepped from the shadows, a knife glinting in the faint light. Seraphine's body froze, her curse flaring like a fire she could barely control. The air around her seemed to thicken, and a cold wind whipped through the alley, making the assassin stagger back in terror. Kale moved like a shadow himself, stepping between Seraphine and the attacker. With a swift motion, he disarmed the man, sending the dagger skittering across the stones. Seraphine's pulse raced, and she felt both fear and awe. This man was dangerous, yet he had saved her. "Pretend I am your husband," he whispered, leaning close so that his words brushed her ear. "If anyone sees us together, no one will dare touch you." Seraphine's eyes widened. "My husband," she stammered, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Yes," Kale said, his gaze steady and unflinching. "For your safety, we must act as if we are bound. No one will question a royal alliance." Her mind raced. Pretend. To bind herself, even in pretense, to a man she barely knew, and yet the logic was undeniable. She had no other choice. She nodded, her fear tempered by the strange, magnetic pull of the man before her. Kale extended his hand. "Then come, quickly." They moved together through the twisting streets, shadows clinging to them like loyal guards. Seraphine noticed how Kale seemed to know the city intimately, avoiding patrols and hidden traps with ease. She tried to match his pace, but her heart felt like it might burst from her chest. As they reached the edge of the city, the landscape changed. The forest grew thicker, the mist deeper. Strange sounds echoed between the trees, creatures unknown and unseen, their eyes gleaming in the darkness. Seraphine shivered, her cloak failing to keep out the chill. Kale glanced at her. "Do not fear the night," he said softly. "There is more danger in hesitation than in the shadows themselves." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. His words were strangely comforting, though the weight of his presence made her aware of her own vulnerability. For the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps she would survive this night. Hours passed as they traveled through the forest, Kale leading with the confidence of someone who had faced death countless times. Occasionally, his hand brushed hers, not enough to touch fully, but enough to send shivers down her spine. Seraphine forced herself to focus on the path, on the need to survive, yet she could not deny the strange thrill of being so close to someone so powerful. Finally, they reached a hidden glade, illuminated by the pale glow of moonlight filtering through the trees. A small, stone cottage stood at the center, simple yet fortified against intruders. Kale pushed the door open, and the warm light inside was a stark contrast to the cold, dark forest. "Here you will be safe for now," Kale said, "but you must remain cautious. Your enemies are clever and they will not give up easily." Seraphine nodded, grateful, though her mind raced with questions. Why help me? You barely know me." Kale's gaze softened for the first time, just slightly. "Because sometimes even kings must protect what is fragile, and you are more than you appear." She felt a flush rise to her cheeks, though she tried to hide it. His words were strange and unsettling, yet comforting. For the first time since her family was taken, she allowed herself a brief moment of peace. They sat across from each other by the hearth, the firelight casting long shadows on the walls. Seraphine studied Kale, trying to understand the man who had entered her life like a storm. He was strong, dangerous, and yet human. There was a vulnerability there, hidden beneath the armor of command. "You must rest," he said. "Tomorrow we plan your next move, but tonight you are under my protection. Pretend, if only for a little while, that we are bound." Seraphine nodded, her heart heavy with both fear and fascination. She felt the strange pull of trust toward this man, the way he made her feel both safe and aware of her own fragility. The night stretched on, filled with the crackle of fire and the whispers of shadows outside. Hours later, Seraphine lay in the small bed Kale had prepared, her thoughts tangled. She thought of her family, of the curse that had made her a target, and of the enigmatic man who now shared her secret. Sleep was elusive, her mind a storm of fear and longing. Then a sudden noise outside the cottage made her sit up. The fire flickered and shadows danced across the walls. Kale was instantly alert, moving to the door with silent grace. "Stay inside," he whispered. "Do not move." Seraphine watched as he stepped into the darkness, his figure swallowed by the night. A faint clatter reached her ears, and she knew, somehow, that danger had found them again. Her heart raced, and she felt the familiar flare of her curse, a pulse of energy she could not yet control. Moments later, Kale returned, his expression unreadable. "It was nothing," he said, though Seraphine could see the tension in his stance. "But you must understand, your enemies will not rest, and neither will fate itself." Her pulse was still wild, yet a strange calm settled over her. She realized something terrifying and exhilarating. She was no longer alone. In a world of shadows and whispers, she had an ally, someone whose strength could match her own fears. As she drifted toward sleep, Seraphine whispered to herself, "Pretend, yes, pretend. But perhaps in pretending something real can grow." Outside, the forest rustled with secrets, and the moon hid behind a cloud. The night was far from over, and somewhere in the darkness eyes watched, patient, waiting, hungry. Cliffhanger. The night was only beginning, and with it, the true tests of trust, power, and the fragile threads of a bond forged in fear, and perhaps something more. Dawn rose over the shadowed mountains, casting thin rays of light that barely pierced the thick mist surrounding Kale's fortress. Seraphine awoke in the small chamber Kale had prepared for her, her mind still tangled in the events of the previous night. The memory of Kale's presence, strong, commanding, yet strangely gentle, lingered like a heartbeat she could not ignore. She dressed quickly, her hands trembling slightly, though she tried to mask her unease. The fortress was silent, its stone halls echoing with secrets. Servants moved quietly, their eyes wary of her, aware of the danger she carried within her. Her curse, though subdued, still radiated in faint pulses, making her feel like a living warning to anyone nearby. Kale appeared at the doorway, his dark eyes sharp, observing her with a mixture of caution and something unspoken. You slept, he said simply, his voice carrying the authority that seemed to bend the shadows around him. Yes, Seraphine replied, forcing calm into her tone, though not peacefully. Kale studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You must learn to control it, he said. Your curse, it is powerful, but without control it will draw the wrong attention, and in this world attention can be deadly. Seraphine swallowed, nodding. I am trying. Kale's gaze softened, though only slightly. I know. He gestured for her to follow. Come. I will show you the fortress. They walked together through the vast halls, the stone floors cold beneath their feet. The fortress was alive with quiet magic. Shadows seemed to bend at Kale's command, whispering secrets in languages Seraphine could not understand. Tapestries depicting past rulers of the shadowed mountains lined the walls, their threads woven with curses and blessings alike. This place, it is unlike anything I have ever seen, Seraphine said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's lips curved into a faint smile. It is not meant for comfort, he said. It is meant for survival and for power. Seraphine shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. Power. The words seemed to hang between them, a tangible force that connected their fates in ways she did not yet understand. Their tour ended in the library, a vast chamber filled with towering shelves of books and scrolls. Dust and candlelight mingled in the air, giving the room a timeless quality. Kale gestured for her to sit, and she complied, curiosity overpowering her nerves. You must learn, Kale said, sitting across from her, not only to control your curse but to understand the world in which it exists. Knowledge is as sharp as any blade. Seraphine nodded, though she felt overwhelmed. I am not sure where to start, she admitted. Kale leaned forward slightly. Then start with truth. Every secret, every lie has a thread. Follow it. And always remember, those who wield power without caution fall first. They spent the day in silence, broken only by Kale's instructions or the soft turning of parchment. Seraphine noticed small things about him. The way his eyes lingered on her, the subtle tension in his posture when she moved closer than expected, and the faint warmth she felt when he spoke to her directly. By mid-afternoon, Kale paused and leaned back in his chair. You have potential, he said, voice low, almost a whisper. More than most realize, but you are also fragile. That is dangerous. Seraphine's breath caught. Fragile, she repeated, startled by his honesty. Yes, Kale said, not in body but in spirit. You are haunted by fear and uncertainty. That makes you vulnerable to those who would see you destroyed. I will protect you, but only if you allow me. The weight of his words pressed on her chest. She wanted to speak, to tell him she was grateful, yet something deeper stirred, a feeling she could not name, a pull that drew her closer to him despite the danger. The day faded into evening, and the shadows of the fortress grew longer. Kale led her to the balcony, overlooking the jagged mountains shrouded in mist. The sky was painted in muted tones of purple and gray, the clouds heavy with the promise of rain. Do you ever feel alone? Seraphine asked suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Kale did not answer immediately. He looked out over the mountains, his jaw tight. Always, he admitted finally. Even surrounded by my court, I am alone. Power comes at a price. Companionship is rare and trust rarer still. Seraphine's chest tightened. She understood that loneliness, the isolation of being feared and misunderstood. And yet, she also understood something else. That loneliness could be shared if only someone was brave enough to reach across the darkness. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them was charged, a quiet tension that made the wind seem colder and the night seem alive. Seraphine felt her pulse quicken, aware of her own heartbeat, aware of him. Before the moment could grow too intimate, a loud crash echoed from below. Both of them tensed, Kale's hand moving instinctively to the hilt of his sword. Servants hurried past the balcony, faces pale with alarm. Trouble, Kale said, voice low. Your enemies are closer than I hoped. Seraphine felt fear and adrenaline surge through her. What should we do? Kale's gaze was sharp, calculating. We prepare, and we stay close. Pretend if you must, but trust me. Your life may depend on it. As the night deepened, Seraphine realized that Kale's presence was both a shield and a challenge. He was danger and safety intertwined, and she could not decide which frightened her more. Later, Kale taught her to move quietly, to sense when shadows shifted unnaturally, and to listen for the faintest sounds of approaching danger. Seraphine learned quickly, her natural intelligence and awareness allowing her to adapt, but she could sense the strain in Kale's gaze whenever she pushed herself too far. "You are remarkable," he said at one point, watching her practice. "Most would falter under the weight of their fear, but you endure. That is rare." Seraphine blushed, unsure how to respond. Praise from Kale felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She wanted to believe she could match him, yet the shadow of her curse always reminded her of her fragility. As midnight approached, the fortress grew eerily silent. Seraphine sat by the fire, her thoughts drifting. She thought of the night they had fled the city together, the closeness she had felt, the danger that had pressed them together in unspoken ways. And she thought of Kale, his strength, his command, his vulnerability. A sudden sound at the window startled her. She spun around and Kale was there in an instant, moving with supernatural speed to stand between her and the outside world. "Stay calm," he whispered. "It is nothing for now, but you must be ready. They will not wait." Seraphine nodded, heart pounding. I will try." Kale studied her for a long moment as though weighing her words against the truth he saw in her eyes. Finally, he spoke, voice low and deliberate. "Pretend we are bound by marriage. It is a shield. It is a weapon. And perhaps in time it may become something real." Her breath caught at his words. Something real. The thought both thrilled and frightened her. She had survived fear, danger, and betrayal, but this was unknown. And yet the warmth of hope stirred within her, fragile but insistent. The night stretched on, filled with quiet whispers and distant storms. Seraphine realized that she had entered a world where every shadow could conceal danger, every word could carry meaning, and every glance could ignite emotions she had never allowed herself to feel. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, the shadows outside the fortress seemed to stir with intention. Figures moved through the mist, silent and deliberate, and Seraphine's curse pulsed faintly in response. Cliffhanger. Kale's eyes darkened as he moved to the battlements, and Seraphine realized with a start that this visitor, friend or foe, would change everything. The night was far from over, and the bond they had forged in pretense was about to be tested in ways neither could imagine. The fortress walls shook with the roar of the wind as a storm descended upon the shadowed mountains. Rain lashed against the stone, thunder echoing like the footsteps of giants. Within the cold halls, Kale moved swiftly, his cloak billowing, eyes sharp and alert. Every shadow was a potential threat, every whisper a warning. Tonight, the danger that had long pursued Seraphine had grown bolder. Seraphine huddled in her chamber, listening to the storm outside, her hands trembling as she clutched the pendant around her neck. The curse within her pulsed, reacting to the tension that filled the fortress. She had grown stronger since arriving here, but she knew that strength alone would not protect her from what was coming. Kale appeared at the door, silent as a shadow. "They are close," he said, his voice low but urgent. "You must stay here. Do not leave the chamber until I return." Seraphine nodded, though fear tightened around her chest. "I understand." He stepped closer, and for a moment she noticed the faint strain in his eyes, the subtle tension in his posture. "You have grown," he said quietly. "Stronger than when I first found you, but this night will test everything." Her pulse quickened, not just from fear, but from the closeness of him, the weight of his presence. "I trust you," she whispered, the words feeling heavier than she had expected. Kale's gaze softened for a moment, the hard edge of command easing just slightly. "Then hold onto that trust," he said. "It may be the only shield you have left." He disappeared into the storm, and Seraphine was left alone with her thoughts. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the night she had fled the city, the strange bond forming with Kale, the lessons in control and courage. She felt a mixture of fear, longing, and an unfamiliar sense of belonging. The storm grew stronger, and then came the first sign of intruders. The sound of footsteps on wet stone echoed through the halls, faint but deliberate. Seraphine's heart raced as she tried to steady herself. The curse within her pulsed, a warning she could no longer ignore. A shadow moved in the doorway and Seraphine froze, but it was not an enemy. It was Kale, his expression grim, hand on the hilt of his sword. "They are here," he said, "and they will not wait." Together they moved through the fortress, Kale leading with the confidence of a man who had faced countless threats. Seraphine followed, her senses sharpened, every nerve alert. She realized that her own abilities, her curse, her instincts, were becoming as important as Kale's strength. They reached the main hall, where the storm's wind blew through broken windows, and the lightning illuminated the approaching figures. A group of assassins, cloaked in darkness, moved with silent precision. Their eyes glinted with malice, and Seraphine felt the familiar fear stir within her. Kale's voice was calm but commanding. "Stay close. Follow my lead." The fight began without warning. Kale moved like a shadow, striking with precision, disarming and disabling his attackers. Seraphine followed his instructions, using her instincts to anticipate movements, her curse flaring just enough to unbalance the enemies without harming herself. For a moment the chaos seemed endless. Steel clashed against steel, shadows danced violently, and the storm outside mirrored the storm within the fortress. Seraphine realized that fear and courage could coexist, that she could feel terror and still act. Kale noticed her in the midst of the battle, and for a brief instant their eyes met. In that glance, unspoken understanding passed between them. They were partners, bound not just by pretense, but by trust forged in fire. Finally, the last of the intruders fell, retreating into the storm, leaving the hall in a tense silence. Kale stood, breathing heavily, eyes scanning for any remaining threat. Seraphine approached him, heart still racing. "You were amazing," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Most would have faltered. Seraphine shook her head, still trembling. I just followed your lead." Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment the distance between them seemed to vanish. "You have done more than follow. You have endured. That is rare." The storm raged outside, but within the fortress, a fragile calm settled. Kale led Seraphine to a small chamber away from the hall, lit by a single flickering candle. She sank onto a chair, exhausted but alive, her body and mind still buzzing from the battle. "You must rest," Kale said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was brief, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. "Tomorrow we plan our next move. Tonight you are safe." Seraphine looked at him, her heart heavy with unspoken emotions. "Kale, why are you helping me?" "You could have let them take me." Kale's expression darkened, his eyes reflecting both anger and something deeper. "Because I will not allow harm to come to you," he said firmly. "Not while I breathe, and not while you trust me enough to stay alive." Her breath caught at the intensity of his words. There was something undeniable between them, a pull that neither could ignore, a bond growing stronger with every shared danger. She wanted to believe in it, to let herself feel it, yet fear whispered that it could be dangerous to trust so completely. Hours passed, and the storm slowly abated, leaving the fortress wrapped in a quiet, uneasy calm. Seraphine and Kale sat together by the fire, their shared silence more meaningful than words. The events of the night had drawn them closer, the pretense of marriage beginning to feel like something more real. "You are different," Kale said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Most people would cower in fear. You rise above it. That is why I trust you, Seraphine." Her cheeks warmed, though she tried to hide it. "I am not sure I deserve that trust," she admitted softly. Kale's gaze held hers, steady and unwavering. Deserve it or not, it is earned by courage, and tonight you earned it." For a long moment they sat together, the firelight flickering across their faces. Seraphine felt a strange comfort in his presence, a sense that, despite the darkness around them, she was no longer alone. Kale, too, seemed changed, his usual command softened by the recognition of her strength and the bond forming between them. But peace was fleeting. A distant cry echoed through the fortress, faint but chilling. Kale's expression hardened instantly, the weight of responsibility returning. "They are not finished," he said, voice low. "This was only the beginning. We must be ready for what comes next." Seraphine nodded, determination replacing some of her fear. She had survived so much already, she would not falter now. And beside her, Kale's presence was both a shield and a challenge, pushing her to be stronger than she had ever imagined. As the night deepened, they prepared together, moving through the fortress with quiet precision. Every corner was checked, every shadow scrutinized. Seraphine's curse, once a source of fear, now became a tool, an extension of her will. She felt the power within her, raw and untamed, and she realized that she was no longer just a victim of fate, she was an active participant in her own survival. Kale watched her, pride hidden behind his stern expression. "You have changed," he said quietly. "Not just in skill, but in spirit. You are becoming what you were always meant to be." Seraphine met his gaze, and for a moment the storm outside seemed to pause, as if the world itself held its breath. "And what am I meant to be?" she asked softly. Kale's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Stronger than anyone believes, and perhaps someone who can teach me what it means to trust." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Seraphine felt a warmth in her chest, a flicker of hope that she had not felt in years. The night had tested them both, yet it had also drawn them closer, binding their fates in ways neither could deny. Cliffhanger. It was someone neither of them expected, a face from Seraphine's past, with intentions that could unravel everything they had fought for. The storm outside had passed, but the storm within the fortress, and within their hearts, was only beginning. The night hung heavy over the fortress, thick with mist and the faint smell of rain-soaked stone. The storm outside had passed, but inside, tension pulsed like a living thing. Seraphine stood near the window, the moonlight casting a pale glow across her face. Her thoughts raced, tangled with fear and anticipation. The figure from her past, unexpected, dangerous, still lingered in her mind. The shadow of betrayal was heavy, yet she felt Kale's presence like a steady anchor beside her. Kale moved silently into the room, his eyes scanning the shadows. The bond between them, forged in danger and fear, had grown stronger, more real. No longer was their alliance just pretense. It had become something deeper, built on trust, respect, and the spark of a connection neither could ignore. "They have come for you," Kale said quietly, voice low but unwavering, "and they will not leave without trying to take what they believe belongs to them." Seraphine clenched her hands, feeling the pulse of her curse within her, a reminder of both her danger and her power. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady. "We face them together." Kale's expression softened, a rare flicker of warmth touching his eyes. "Together," he agreed, "always." They descended into the great hall, moving as one through the fortress. The air was tense, every shadow a potential threat. At the far end of the hall, the figure emerged from the darkness, a nobleman from Seraphine's past, once a trusted friend, now a rival seeking power through her fear. His eyes burned with ambition and a cruel smile twisted his lips. "So, the cursed lady has found herself an ally," he sneered, voice echoing off the stone walls. "How convenient." Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Seraphine and the intruder. "Leave now and perhaps I will allow mercy," he said, his tone calm but deadly. "Harm her and you will face consequences you cannot survive." The man laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Consequences? You are nothing but a shadow king hiding in the mountains." "I will take what I came for." Seraphine's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. She felt the surge of her curse within her, sensing the danger and focusing her energy. Her fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into determination. She would not be a pawn. She would fight alongside Kale for her life, and for something far greater. The clash began without warning. Kale moved with the grace and precision of a seasoned warrior, his sword cutting through the air, deflecting strikes and forcing the intruder back. Seraphine followed his lead, using her instincts and her curse to unbalance their enemy. The room filled with the sound of steel on steel, the crackle of energy, and the heavy thrum of the storm still lingering in the walls. Kale and Seraphine fought in perfect unison, their movements synchronized without words. Each knew the other's strength, each anticipated the other's actions. The pretense of their bond had evolved into something tangible, a trust that could not be broken by fear or deception. The intruder stumbled, shocked by the unexpected resilience of the pair before him. "Impossible!" he shouted, lunging forward with renewed fury. Seraphine felt the surge of her power, a pulse that extended from her very being. She focused, allowing her curse to flow, not as a weapon of destruction but as a shield and a guide. The intruder faltered, disoriented by the energy radiating from her, and Kale struck with precision, disarming him. For a moment, silence fell. The only sound was the distant echo of the storm outside. Seraphine's chest heaved as she realized the fight was over. The intruder, defeated and powerless, fled into the shadows, leaving them alone in the hall. Kale turned to her, his expression a mixture of pride and something softer, almost tender. "You did well," he said quietly. "More than well, you were extraordinary." Seraphine shook her head, still catching her breath. "I could not have done it without you," she replied. "You taught me, guided me." Kale interrupted her softly, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You taught yourself," he said. "I only showed you the way. You had the strength all along." Her heart swelled, and for a moment words failed her. She looked at him, realizing that the bond between them had changed irreversibly. It was no longer survival that tied them together. It was understanding, trust, and the spark of something far deeper. The night stretched on, the storm outside fading into quiet mist. Kale led Seraphine to the ancient chamber deep within the fortress, a place of old magic and whispers of past rulers. The walls were etched with symbols of protection and guidance, and a faint glow emanated from the stone floor. "This is where we will end the threat of your curse," Kale said, his voice reverent, "and where we will reclaim what has been lost." Seraphine's pulse quickened as she stepped into the chamber. She felt the energy of the place, ancient and powerful, stirring within her. The fear that had accompanied her all her life was present, but it had transformed into focus and resolve. Kale took her hands in his, the warmth of his touch grounding her. "Together," he said, repeating the word that had become a promise. "Trust in yourself and trust in me. Only then will the darkness be faced and overcome." Seraphine nodded, closing her eyes and drawing a deep breath. She allowed her curse to flow, not as a danger but as a conduit for strength. Kale mirrored her focus, his power combining with hers in a quiet, potent harmony. Light and shadow mingled in the chamber, a dance of energy that pulsed with life and intention. The ritual was not easy. Waves of fear and doubt threatened to overwhelm her, but Kale's presence steadied her. He whispered words of guidance and encouragement, grounding her in the moment, reminding her that she was not alone. Together, they faced the essence of the curse, acknowledging its presence without fear, embracing the power that had once been a source of terror. Time seemed to stretch, the chamber alive with the pulse of energy. Then, with a final surge, the curse's weight lifted, its force transformed from a burden into a source of power. Seraphine felt it settle within her, no longer chaotic or threatening, but a part of her own being, a strength she could wield with wisdom and care. Kale released her hands, and she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. There was awe in his expression, pride in something more, something unspoken that hung between them like the quiet calm after a storm. "You have done it," he said softly. "You have faced the darkness and emerged stronger." Seraphine's lips curved into a faint smile. "We did it," she corrected, the truth of their shared journey undeniable. For the first time in years, Seraphine felt free, free of fear, free of doubt, free of the weight that had haunted her life. And beside her, Cale was more than an ally, more than a protector. He was a companion, a partner, someone who had faced darkness by her side and emerged changed, too. They left the chamber together, the fortress quiet and serene. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the mountains, casting gentle rays across the misty peaks. The world seemed reborn, fresh and alive, a reflection of the transformation within them. Cale stopped at the balcony, looking out over the land. "The kingdom is safe," he said quietly, "for now. But remember, shadows are never gone for long. You must remain vigilant." Seraphine stood beside him, feeling the warmth of his presence. "I will," she said softly, "and I will not be afraid, not anymore." Cale turned to her, his expression softened by the rare vulnerability she had come to recognize. "You have changed me, Seraphine," he admitted. "In ways I did not expect. You taught me trust and something more. You taught me that even in darkness there can be light." Her heart swelled with emotion. She stepped closer, the distance between them disappearing. "And you have changed me, Cale," she said. "You taught me courage, and you showed me what it means to be seen and protected. Not for my curse, not for my past, but for who I am." For a long moment they stood together in silence, the wind carrying the faint scent of rain and earth. The bond between them, forged in fear and strengthened by trust, was no longer a pretense. It was real, powerful, and unbreakable. Cale reached out, taking her hand gently, and for the first time their connection was more than words or shared danger. It was a promise, a recognition of everything they had endured and everything they would face together.